Was global talent and UK your number one destination?
Outside of school, I started applying for internships after the program, and then I was fortunate to get one.
I guess in Essex because you lived there and you wanted to stay there. What are the job opportunities in there?
So it just entails day-to-day backend development because I'm a software engineer, but I mostly work as a backend software engineer.
It's good to see you at the WelcomeTech YouTube channel. And today we have Chiamako Kenwa, who is the holder of the Global Talent Visa and who will tell us a little bit about her experience living in the UK and working in the IT area. And first question that I have for you is, why did you initially decide to move from your country to UK?
I think the major decision for me is the vast opportunities that you get in the UK, access to a large amount of like resources, and also the fact that you get to be in a more competing environment. Also, the fact that I do have like a lot of friends who have happened to move to the UK as well, so it also did feel like a great opportunity.
Do they also all work in IT? So like you guys all
Yeah.
You come from Nigeria, yes?
Yeah, I was initially based out of Lagos, Nigeria.
And when you were moving, or like initially thinking about moving, was global talent and UK your number one destination, or were you thinking about other opportunities, and like what was the choice process, like why UK?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd always known that I wanted to move to the UK, mostly because of like the opportunities it has, and also the fact that I do have like a lot of family, I do have a lot of friends here. The global talent route wasn't the only route I was looking at as well. I did get a scholarship for a master's at the University of Essex, so I already had that in the pipeline before deciding to also apply for the global talent visa.
So when you applied for global talent, you already like the masters that you were also enrolled into, that was already a part of your background, yes? So like you were but when did you receive the global talent visa?
So I got the visa in August this year. But just prior to getting the visa this year, I had initially applied last year, and I applied out of Lagos, Nigeria, but my application was refused. And the good thing with the global talent visa is that you do get enough reasons as to why maybe your application was unsuccessful. So basically, I knew that I had met one out of the three criteria, because there are three criteria to meet for the global talent visa, and that just kind of gave me like hope to know that, oh, I actually could apply again. I could stand a better chance at getting it this time. So I did apply this year. I think I applied in July, and then I got endorsed in August.
And can you tell me a little bit more about the criteria you didn't meet initially, and what did you do to fix it? Like, how did you meet it eventually?
Okay, so I applied for the exceptional promise, and the difference between the exceptional promise and the talent is that on the promise visa, you get 5 years in the UK, and the talent, you get 3 years in the UK. So I applied there's the mandatory criteria where you have to show that you're an exceptional talent, which is a mandatory criteria for everyone that's applying. Then there are like 3 other optional criteria, but the 2 that I chose was the proof of recognition outside of work, because I did feel like I had a lot more evidence there and accomplishments as well. And then the second criteria that I chose was showing technical contribution to a product-led digital technology company, and that was also based off of my own experience in the technology space. So those were the 2 optional criteria that I chose, majorly because I felt like that was my strongest point. And it's the same thing I also chose in the second application as well. The same criteria that I picked were pretty much the same. So,
but what can you give me a little more detail about your whole background? Because like you said, these are your strong suits, but can you walk me through those a little bit?
Okay, so my background, I studied marine biology in the university. I have a BSc in marine biology. But once I graduated out of uni, I got an opportunity to apply for a couple of scholarships. The good thing is that Google and companies like Microsoft and Facebook would sponsor people from Africa to learn about like coding skills on different resource websites. I think in this case, when I applied, it was Pluralsight at the time. So that was my first experience getting into tech. I basically learned how to build like HTML, CSS, web pages, and that was just my first landing experience in tech. And I think because of the fact that I enjoyed it, that was what enabled me to like pursue a career in the tech space. Outside of school, I started applying for internships after the program, and then I was fortunate to get one with an African bank in this case. And that's also where I picked up Java and then also transitioned from like a junior software engineer to a mid-level software engineer. So I have like over 2 years experience now, getting on 3 years. And I know to apply for a global talent visa, you should show, like if you have less than 5 years experience, you should apply for Promise. And if you have over 5 years experience, then you should apply for Talent. So
that was quite a drastic change from marine biology into JavaScript. That's like a huge leap. And so you've never done tech before while you were doing your bachelor's. You were just a biologist.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's amazing. And so like when you were applying, like the evidence of your talent, you basically showed, like what did you show? That you were like those scholarships that you had, like the internship with the bank, and maybe anything else that like to portray like what kind of a promising specialist you are.
Yeah, I think the good thing with the Tech Nation visa, if you're applying in the digital technology space, is that the site is quite descriptive enough. So they give you like lists of examples that you should use as evidence and for each of the criteria that you're going for. So for my proof of recognition outside of work, I had given talks at conferences, and basically I had volunteered for a lot more developer communities as well. I had served as a community manager for a couple of developer communities in Africa. So it was just most of my like volunteering work and my speaking engagement that I used for that criteria. But also when you look at the proof of like technical contributions to a product-led digital technology company, in this case, you should have things like your technical experience. So it could be, your code commits to a GitHub project or the project that you're currently working on at the company. You also have things like open source. I didn't use open source in my case because I hadn't contributed to open source before, but I've seen people that have used that as well as an evidence. Also things like product design. Sometimes it's good to also look at things like some of the products that you're working on from a product design perspective or from a user's perspective, and just being able to like explain your own contribution and your own accomplishments, like working on some of this product. I think that's a very defining factor when it comes to the technician application, because that really was the difference between like my first application and then my second application. Yeah, and I also added things like awards as well. Like for instance, the scholarship that I got for a master's program too was also one of my evidence as well. So
have you finished the master's program yet, or are you still in it?
Yeah, I currently just finished. Yeah, but I was able to switch from my student visa to a global talent visa. So
oh, congratulations on the master's. And so do you still live in Essex, or did you leave it after master's?
I'm still in Essex, but I'm in a different location. My school is based in Colchester, which is the University of Essex, but right now I'm in Chelmsford, which is still in Essex though.
And if I understand correctly, right now you're working at Pleo, yes? Can you tell me a little bit about the job and why did you choose? It's a Danish-based company, right? Like, are you allowed to continue to work there when you have global talent or not? And like, how does it work?
So Pleo is a remote-first company. And the good thing is that you are allowed to work from like anywhere in the world. Although they do have offices out of London and they do have office in Denmark and I think Portugal as well. So with a global talent visa, it really affords you the flexibility of not looking out just for companies that would only require you to sponsor them. So in this case, you're open to companies that do not require, sponsorship as well. So that's the good flexibility with a global talent visa. So that gives you leverage over, like, for instance, if you're on a work visa in this case. But for Pleo, it's a remote first company. So it's really not about like, visa sponsorship, especially if you're fully remote with them. It's kind of different. But I would say if you're working for a UK company on a global talent visa, then you do have an opportunity to work with a lot more companies and to take up a lot more roles because of the fact that you would not be requiring sponsorship.
What are the specifics of working at Pleo? Can you talk a little about your job? Like what do you do now?
So it just entails day-to-day backend development, because I'm a software engineer, but I mostly work as a backend software engineer. That would involve things like, for instance, creating APIs or just maintaining certain features or just developing new features. Also, it's the same thing like working with a regular tech company where you have like regular maybe one-on-ones, or you have like meetings and stand-ups and those kind of activities are basically what would happen if you're working as an engineer at Pleo. Also, we're open to, like, because we're remote first, we basically open to things like what we call like team camps, and you just basically schedule like some time off for your colleagues, travel to a different country. There's that kind of flexibility you get when you're working fully remote. So those are just the major things about working at Pleo.
Have you used the opportunity to travel?
I have, well, prior to like getting the global talent visa, I have like traveled to the UK and I think the US at the time. But the good thing too now is that basically you can still travel even if you're not like resident in the UK. You can still come to the UK or travel to every other country. But now you have like a full like residency here, depending on your length of your visa. So although you're not allowed to be like out of the country for a certain amount of time, so there is some like visa restrictions depending on the kind of residence permit that you have. But yeah, it does afford you more flexibility. For instance, traveling a lot more within Europe. It's just that sadly now the UK is no longer part of the EU. But there are a lot of like changes and requirements to that as well. So it's still the same thing as just applying for a regular visa to travel to a different country.
And before choosing Pleo, like when you were just looking at the market, I guess in Essex, because you lived there and you wanted to stay there, what are the job opportunities in there? Can you talk a little about like what was the market like, and did you see a lot of opportunities for your specialty?
I think like generally, if you're in tech, there's a lot more demand. Even though like right now things are not the way they used to be like 2 years from now, but I still feel like there's a lot of demand work being a software engineer. But for Essex, I wasn't really looking as to like the job opportunities here because like I was here as a student and I had to like study most of the time. But just judging from like random recruiters reaching out on LinkedIn, for instance, or just going on like job websites and having people reach out to you via email, I would say there's a lot more opportunities, especially if you're a software engineer in the UK or even like anywhere in the world in this case. So yeah, I still would say that most of the jobs are a lot more in London, for instance, because that's where like a lot of companies are situated. But if you're looking at the likes of like Manchester, Birmingham, those are also very top tech hubs, and there happens to be a lot more job opportunities there as well.
And it's like to round up our conversation, I wanted to also learn about your experience in UK in general, like its day-to-day life. So I was wondering, could you highlight maybe like the best and worst moments about living in the UK? Like, what are the pros and cons from your personal experience?
I would say one thing I'm still adjusting to is the weather, because like living in Nigeria, you're used to the hot climate. But the UK is really different. Like the weather just really changes, and I'm still getting used to that. I would say one of the pros is the community, for instance. Like I said earlier, I did have like a lot of my friends that have moved to the UK as well. And there happens to be like a lot more opportunities. For instance, the global talent route. Also, they do have another form of visa. I think it's called the scale-up visa. So there are a lot more opportunities now to immigrants who are looking to like migrate to the UK on a visa route in this case. So that's very good. So that gives you the opportunity to meet a lot more people and people from diverse backgrounds, which is good because you get to learn like a couple of things from them as well. And if you are applying for a global talent visa, there's also like the technician community. They do have a Discord forum, they do have a LinkedIn page. So it's just more about the fact that it feels like a community here. you'd never get to feel like you're isolated. I mean, I didn't get that experience when I moved here, so that's a good thing as well. Yeah, I think that's my own pro and cons with the UK, but I feel like I'm still exploring. I didn't really get a chance to do so much when I moved initially, which was last year because I was on a student visa most of the time I spent in school. But right now that I'm done, I'm looking at like exploring like a lot more and getting to know the UK better.
And maybe like culture-wise, what were the things that were the most surprising to you? Like something that just felt different?
I think the fact that what really felt different for me is that here you have to be more independent, which is a good thing. Like when I was in Lagos, for instance, I used to stay with my parents a lot, but here I moved out on my own, got an apartment, starting to pay bills. So it kind of just makes you more independent. Also culture shock. I think because I traveled here before, I'm kind of like used to so many things that that happened. But I think generally I've met some really nice people. Like sometimes I would be carrying like very heavy stuffs on the road, and then someone would be so nice to like help me through it. It's kind of surprising because I didn't get that a lot from where I'm from, but it's quite different here. Sometimes it might be based on location. Maybe certain located areas would have like a lot more nicer and like friendlier people than others. But I think for me, generally, I've happened to meet like a lot of nice people here in the UK, which is quite surprising. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but that's the only thing that's the only thing
Maybe,
I can think of right now.
maybe anything connected to your work, like work-wise, like work ethic. Because have you had experience of working in Nigeria, or did you just study and straight go to UK?
Oh yeah, I did have experience working in Lagos, Nigeria. I would say work-wise there was a lot more like cultural differences because like where I'm from, it's not really an open-ended culture. It's just the fact that you're being assigned to, like, for instance, if you're working on something and then you're expected like certain timelines and deadlines, that kind of thing. But with like more international organizations or like working abroad, it's really different. Like no one's really looking over your shoulders to know, oh, okay, the deadline's approaching. Are you done with this? Everyone's really, really friendly. The work culture is very open-ended. It's flat structured as well. So there's no hierarchy.
Mm.
For instance, if you have like senior managers or senior colleagues, it's really nothing like that. It also gives you the flexibility of like taking more ownership in the projects that you work on. I didn't really get a lot of that while working out of Lagos, Nigeria, because like the work culture is very, very different from working here. And you'd be surprised, like random things like just posting on Slack as to like telling people how your day went. It's really appreciated. Yeah, or even posting like pictures of your pets. And yeah, another thing I do notice, a lot of people here have pets. So that's really different from where I'm from. But things like that would go a long way into like for instance, team bonding and just posting it on Slack. Those are kind of things that are really, really important here, which is something I had to start adjusting to and not just treating it as work, but also like as an environment where you just feel like you're at home. So
Do you feel like it's sort of like an upper initiative that it comes from the managers that they are trying to set a very like homey environment, or do you feel like it's just cultural, as in like UK people just like to show their cats on Slack like this? It's like a very
while I was working in Nigeria, the only I would say international job I've worked at is at Pleo. So I really can't say if it's just the Pleo thing or if it's just how companies are in general. But judging out of people's experience, I would say it's really not the case because some people don't like have this kind of experiences as well. So it kind of just depends on the company that you're associated with. So I would say it's just the company's culture as well. But sometimes you do get to come across people who are just generally friendly and just very, very nice, regardless of whatever company that they're working with. So that's also a good sign as well. But most of the time, it's like the culture that the company tries to imbibe in everyone.
well. I think that pretty much rounds up our conversation. Thank you so much for meeting with me and sharing your experience. That was very interesting. It was very nice meeting you, and I hope you have a nice day, and bye.